Hello, everyone. You're most welcome to the Ugaman live session. And this time round, we're going to be looking at the top stories around Africa. So, if this is your first time to see my face on your screen, please don't forget to subscribe and don't forget to turn on the notifications bell so that you can be able to always get the new uploads that I make on this channel. But for this time round, we are going to be looking at some of the top stories making rounds, making headlines around Africa. And this show is actually to encourage you to remain updated and also to know what's happening around you. And this is the reason we are doing this segment of Around Africa with Ugaman. So most welcome to the show. And please, if you're new, don't forget to comment. Don't forget to leave a thumbs up for the show host. And don't forget to support this channel. So let's straight away kick into it. And if you know any story, no matter where you're watching it from, if you have any story that you want us to know, or you want to give us any story that is trending in your area, that is trending in your town, please make it a point that you drop us a comment, and then I'll be able to read through those comments for other people that will be viewing in to know about that story. Today is the 13th day of July 2020, and the following are going to be the stories that we're going to be looking at. So first and foremost, today I'm going to be looking at stories from across Uganda. I'll move into Kenya, then I'll move into South Africa, and then of course I'll do a roundup summary for top African stories before we end this segment. So most welcome, and please don't forget, if you are watching this channel for the very first time, my name is Ugaman, and don't forget to follow me up on my social media platforms: Twitter, Ugaman01, and then Facebook, it is Maybe Afraid, Instagram, Ugaman01. So most welcome, guys, and let's have a blast. Let's have a good time as we keep informed, as we get to know what stories are making headlines and why some stories are actually becoming very important to us. Being informed is one of the major things that you need to keep yourselves up with. Information is power. And of course, to those that have the right information, it is always becoming an easy thing to make decisions and also to understand what to do in a given circumstance or in a given situation. So, welcome aboard. Enjoy the show. So definitely I'm starting off from Uganda, where we have so many stories that are making rounds, but one that has actually caught my attention is one where the Uganda police, has started impounding tinted taxis. Now, for starters, this, I think, is something, that is a little bit unusual. Why would a commuter taxi, why would a public van that moves people from one spot to another have tinted glass? Okay, this doesn't seem right, because, and I think this is why the Uganda police is coming out to impound such taxis. So I'll take you through a brief of the story. The Kampala Metropolitan Police spokesperson Patrick Onyango said many taxis have now resorted to tinting their glasses to confuse the police. Remember, this around this period, people are allowed to travel in taxis during this lockdown, but the taxi is meant to carry half of the capacity. And also, the passengers are supposed to have face masks on them for them to be able to use these taxis. So when you have a taxi that has tinted glass, it becomes a bit confusing for for the police to do their job. And of course, that is to monitor and ensure that everybody follows up on the terms and conditions and the guidelines that were issued by the Uganda government during this lockdown. So I think this is one of the reasons that the Uganda police is coming out to make sure that they control that. So the story is, following the tight regulation on public transport, some taxi operators have come up with different tricks to flout the new directives. Okay, President Yoweri Museveni on June 2nd relaxed the COVID-19 lockdown, allowing operations of public transport and opening of shopping malls for business. However, public transport returned with stringent measures where all taxis, minibuses, and buses were allowed to carry half the normal capacity, including drivers and conductors, while private cars are allowed to carry only 4 people, including the driver. So, tinting taxi glasses, but police says through their intelligence they learned that many passenger service vehicles, PSVs, especially taxis, are deliberately flouting the presidential directive and carry more passengers than the recommended number. Other directives include all passengers to wear face masks and banning of touts on taxi stages. Okay, so the Kampala Metropolitan Police spokesperson Patrick Onyango said many taxis have now resorted to tinting their glasses to confuse the Uganda police. So I think this is also something very, very important, and I think it's a very key step as far as protecting and preventing COVID-19 within our communities is concerned. Okay, there are so many other stories that are making headlines, but another story that has caught my eye from the New Vision Kampala, Uganda here is somebody has written an article saying keep children physically active in this pandemic. Now, we also need to understand that in this pandemic, many schools, actually all schools, have closed in many countries, and it becomes very important to make sure that the children are kept active. So somebody has written an article here encouraging parents and caretakers to make sure they physically keep their children active to throughout this period of COVID-19 pandemic. Okay. Um, of course, there is also another story of COVID-19 affecting private universities, where I think private universities are now running out of funds to take care of the universities. So they are coming out to ask government to support them. They are coming out to ask government to support them. So private universities, just like any other institutions, have not had the opportunity to continue doing normal business because they actually closed down institutions, and the government also closed down schools. So remember, these institutions need to have funds to keep taking care of the institution buildings, the compounds, and everything. So you find that many of them do not actually have that funding because they are not doing business. Students are not studying, and therefore the university is not earning. So private universities in Uganda have come out to ask the government to support them. Okay, so looking at another story that is making it big in the Daily Monitor, and of course this story is from Madagascar. Okay, now 2 Madagascar lawmakers die with coronavirus. Now we need to remember that Madagascar is one of those countries that came out to say they had found medicine for COVID-19. And this was, of course, rejected by so many health officials, especially those that are having a very close relationship with the World Health Organization. However, so many African countries welcomed the news, and quite a number of African countries went ahead to buy this medicine from Madagascar. Of course, we need to remember that the president of Madagascar also encouraged consumption of this herbal medicine that they had come up with. But news coming out lately indicates that Madagascar is actually going through a very tough time in terms of coronavirus infections. And this also brings back the question of whether the medicine they talked about was actually right, or there is something that needed to be done. So the news coming out of Madagascar is 2 Madagascar lawmakers die with coronavirus. And this is a story that is also making rounds around Africa. But we need to remember that in April, Madagascar President Andry Rajoelina, launched a local herbal concoction he claimed prevented and cures coronavirus. So the story is Madagascar President Andre on Sunday said two lawmakers, one member of the Senate and one deputy, had died after becoming infected with coronavirus. 11 other deputies and 14 senators had also tested positive for the virus. Najorina said the Indian Ocean island on July 5th placed its capital, Antananarivo, under the fresh lockdown following new surge of infections 2 months after the restrictions were eased. So Madagascar has now recalled a lockdown on the entire country because they seem to be getting more coronavirus infections. And this is after 2 months of easing lockdown. So this brings me to the question, guys. Um, Africa and the precautions we're taking. Of course, the Madagascar story is not a unique one. We have had similar stories in Tanzania. We have also had so many other stories coming out where people are doubting the results, where people are doubting the steps taken to, verify who is COVID-19 positive and who is not. And this is, I think, for me, it poses a huge risk because if we start trusting things that do not have any kind of proof that they do work and they can help us in this process, I think we are getting to a point where we are going to be defeated by this virus. So we need to be extra careful by what we actually accept as remedies for this period and for this pandemic. And this is where I think we all need to come out and be very active, especially our scientists need to come out and make sure that we do enough research, that we do enough and we have enough evidence to approve some of the precautions and some of the cures that have been found. So the story of Madagascar leaves a lot to be answered, especially for the people that said this cure was working, and then the cure actually is, found to be putting Madagascar in a very tight spot where they even have to recall a lockdown onto their country because many more infections are coming up. So this needs to be a reminder to all African countries that this disease is real, because not just because we haven't had many deaths doesn't mean the disease doesn't exist. So we need to be extra careful. So that is a story that is making rounds, but of course it's controversial a bit because if you remember how people praised Madagascar and this herbal cure that was concocted, and of course the World Health Organization warned everybody that was going to be using that, and of course not so many people listen, but this is what is now happening to Madagascar. So there is another story here. Somebody has written, and it has caught my attention. So the story is why more men get COVID-19. Why more men get COVID-19? So this is a story that is written in the Daily Monitor, and I'll just read you a brief of it, talking about why more men get COVID-19. Men still dominate the numbers of those most affected by COVID-19 as Kenya crossed 10,000 mark with 379 new cases reported yesterday. Okay, in a statement sent to newsrooms, Health Cabinet Secretary Mutahi Kagwe said that men accounted for 253 cases, which is nearly 7 in 10 people. There are 10,105 cases out of 215,000 cases. Tests, the majority have been men. So I had not actually taken enough time to read, but it looks like this report that is coming in from Kenya indicates that more men are actually getting COVID-19 and becoming positive for the disease than women. So in this story, they are trying to look at some of the reasons why. Of course, I see it includes a bit of scientific explanations about chromosomes and related stuff. But if you look at the numbers that of men that have actually become COVID-19, in 9 men in Kiambu, there are 49, in Busia, there are 38, Migori, there are 19, and Mombasa, 16, still account for the largest number of new infections. These counties have nearly 50-50 women population, which proves that there are certain vulnerabilities that make men susceptible to the virus. Okay, so dear men out there, those of you that are watching this show, this is the report that is coming out. So you quickly need to understand that maybe men actually are more prone to becoming corona virus infected than women in our society today. So men and or women have the Y and X chromosomes, and females have two copies of the X chromosome. One of the X chromosomes often has an inactive immunity gene, but in some cases, it does not undergo inactivation. So women end up with double the immune genes as compared to men. Okay, so the reason actually is a bit scientific, and this report shows that it's about the chromosomes. It's about the chromosomes that women have, where they have a double X, which means they have double indication of their immunity system. Okay. Um, all right. So still from Uganda here, we have another story that is about politics and elections, where the country wants to take a scientific election, and that's what many people are opposing. Many people are opposing this move of the scientific election. So those are some of the stories that are making headlines here in Uganda. So let's look at Kenya. Let's look at Kenya. Kenya is a very, very big, very good morning, Susan. How are you doing? Thanks to Dr. KNP Show. Thanks for watching in. Thanks to Ernest, Adore Ernest. Thanks for watching in. Yeah, you're watching Around Africa with Ugaman. So I'm looking at some of the top stories that are making headlines across Africa, and those stories that are also intriguing to look deep down into. So I'm moving to Kenya now, and I'm looking at some of the top stories where, of course, they're looking at Mathari Hospital in a very, very sorry state. This is one of the top stories in the Daily Nation in Kenya. Just to go deep into this story, for more than a decade, the Mathari Teaching and Referral Hospital was a favorite destination for Health Cabinet Secretary Mutahi Kagwe. In an exclusive with the Nation, the Cabinet Secretary narrated how a childhood friend who was the best man in his wedding developed severe mental illness. Okay? He was a brilliant guy, Mr. Kagwe said on phone. His friend got a scholarship to study engineering in Manchester in the United Kingdom, where he even scored the first class. When he came back home, he got a job and rose through the ranks in a multinational company. Then thereafter, mental illness happened. I watched him get sick and deteriorate. He was hospitalized in the 90s, and it had become part of my routine to take food and visit him regularly. Okay, so the cabinet secretary would also not reveal the diagnosis or the name of his friend, except that he died recently due to complications that were exacerbated by his mental illness. Okay, nearly 1% of the population, about 476,000, suffer from severe mental illness, according to a recent report released by the president's mental health task force. This includes psychosis, in which people lose touch with reality and see or hear things that are not real. Okay, so in this report, the minister explains how a hospital that has been treating mental healthy illness is actually collapsing. Okay, it is collapsing because I think it doesn't have enough support, and this is now where people are calling on the government to come in and support this hospital, because many people actually, looking back at our state, our normal state today, many people are struggling with mental health. So meaning that we need to have functional hospitals. We need to have, anywhere in the world, by the way, across Africa, across any part of the world, we need to have health facilities ready to take on these patients, ready to come out and help people that are going through a state of mental health. That state where people actually lose touch with reality and start having a lot of thoughts, depression, suicidal thoughts, and stuff like that. We need health facilities that can help people overcome those challenges. So this is what this report is actually looking to. Of course, there is also another report here saying Uhuru went into Del Monte Landro. Of course, this is a land scandal where I think the president is picking interest to go in and make sure they do sort this land scandal that's in Kenya. Okay, so the roads agency closes key Mombasa bypasses over cracks. Now, this story is one that is also catching my attention because recently in Uganda there was a very big story that made it to social media, where one of the main bridges in Jinja, the Nile Bridge, had developed cracks, and people were asking what was happening. People are asking why a road that, a bridge that has cost us so much was getting cracks. But hey, the same is happening to to our friends in Kenya here. So the Kenyan National Highways Authority, which would be the Uganda National Roads Authority of Kenya, has decided to close quite a number of bypasses due to cracks on the roads. And this was done 2 days back. So it looks like there is a problem maybe with the construction of those roads. But hey, let's look into the story and see what it says. So the Kenyan National Highways Authority, that is KNHA, has closed the section of the Mombasa Southern Bypass for 2 days as part of the new road infrastructure touching on Moi International Airport developed cracks. Okay, so in a statement, the authority warned motorists temporarily closure to Maritini, Machwe, Kipevu, which is a road for a period of 48 hours to allow for necessary monitoring and further engineering intervention. So the authority came out to warn users of the road, of course, to make sure that maybe they don't get any casualties, but also they needed to provide time for the engineers to come out and establish the exact cause of the cracks that are developing on this new road, this new bypass. So a limited section of the cut slope along the said road and adjacent to the Moi International Airport face line has been observed to exhibit movement as a result of previous moisture ingress and unfavorable subsurface conditions. Read the statement from the authorities, and the director, Peter Mudinia, established that. So this is not a rare case, but also it brings me back to some of the questions that many African people have been raising as regards construction of roads. First and foremost, it is thought that our roads are the most expensive in Africa. And of course, I'm talking across Africa. Many the budgets that we use to set up our roads are quite exorbitant, and also the amounts that we use to set up these roads sometimes is actually very shocking. So you would think outside the box and say maybe because we use large amounts of money to set up these roads, that the quality would actually be guaranteed. But hey, sometimes to our disappointment, the quality does not reflect the amounts that have been injected into these roads, the amounts that have been injected into these infrastructures. Corruption still remains a very key factor at the center of this. Infrastructure development is actually one of the major pillars that Africa needs to grow and develop. But there is quite a lot of corruption involved at the level of tenders, at the level of signing contracts, and of course, sometimes even at the level of laying the quality roads that Africans need to be using, the citizens need to be using. So quite a lot needs to be done. This is not a unique challenge to Kenya as such. It's a challenge that so many people face. Okay, it's a challenge that so many people face. The other story that is also making headlines here in Nairobi, okay, is of course where the governor Sonko is in drama, of course, as they fight for tenders and some other things in Nairobi. But before we go into that story, let's look at the drama as man strips naked to protest wife's removal as MCA. Okay, so this story is one that has been making headlines, where the husband, okay, where the husband to one of the people who is a member of the county assembly was removed, and the husband stripped naked to strike. Now, this story has two faces to it that is very exciting. First and foremost, a husband who strikes because their wife has been removed as a member of the county is one that has really got the guts, because usually men tend to look back, tend to hold back when things are happening to their wives. But this man went ahead to undress to protest the removal of his wife from the cabinet of the members of the county assembly. So there was drama outside the Nairobi County Assembly yesterday after a man stripped down his inner wear when he got the win that his wife's rival was to be sworn in as member of the county assembly, that is MCA. The man, identified as Job Odro, caused a scene outside the Nairobi County Assembly entrance after tip-off that Perpetua Mpojiwa was set to be sworn in to take the position of his wife, Eve Malenya, as ODM party's nominated member of the county assembly. You cannot remove my wife from her position. I want my wife back in her position. The man was heard shouting as he tried to access the assembly offices. Okay, the dramatic scene led to a traffic snarl up in the city center as motorists stopped to watch the drama unfold. Okay, it took the intervention of the Mthari North MCA, Jared Okode, alias Defao, to plead with Mr. Odro to put on his clothes, and of course, Malenya was deregistered from IEBC nomination list last year following a successful court case by Mrs. Mpojua. So this is a man who was actually complaining about the removal of his wife from the county assembly. Of course, that was after a court case, but I think he was, trying to reject what the county assembly had done, swearing in the rival to his wife. Of course, the wife lost a case in court, and I think that is the reason she was being removed from the county assembly. But very interesting is that the man decided to undress. Okay, so what is not known is whether his protest could actually change the decision by the county assembly, but which I think certainly did not happen. Okay, so if we're going to the business news in Kenya, with the business news that is happening, striking gold in lucrative berries. Okay, this is actually a big story there. Then cheaper cooking gas prices to stay until next June. Of course, gas has really become cheap in Kenya, so this will stay until next year, June, which is a good thing for clean energy, and also for, for people who usually use charcoal and cut down trees. I think this will be very important that gas is now cheap for the people in Nairobi. So those are some of the stories that are making headlines in Nairobi. Of course, so many other stories. You can check out the Daily Nation. If you have some time, you can be able to know some of the top stories. So right now, allow me to move to a summary of the Africa stories that are actually making serious headlines. So we're going to start from Mali, where we know Mali actually is having so many stories happening right now, but the embattled Mali president dissolves top court amidst protests. Okay, Mali's embattled president Ibrahim Boubacar Keita on Saturday announced the dissolution of the constitutional court in an attempt to calm the civil unrest that has gripped the country. Of course, the court has been at the center of controversy in Mali after it overturned provisional results for the parliamentary poll earlier this year, triggering protests in several cities that on Friday descended into violence. Okay? So Keita, in an address, said, "I have decided to repeal the licenses of the remaining members of the Constitutional Court and to move towards implementation of the recommendations by the Economic Community of West Africa States, which is ECOWAS." So he went ahead to dissolve the Constitutional Court. And of course, this has come as a result of protests that are coming in from the citizens as regards the cancellation of the poll results of the parliamentary results that came through earlier this year. So the clashes raged again in the capital, Bamako, on Saturday as demonstrators, angered by the long-running conflict, economic wars, and perceived government corruption, demanded Keita's resignation. Okay, so people have been demanding that the president resigns, but the president went ahead now to say, hey, let me first dissolve the Constitutional Court and see if this issue can be sorted. Okay, so that is one of the other top stories that are making headlines across Africa. We also have Ethiopia to restore toppled UK bust of Emperor Haile Selassie. Of course, Ethiopia says they are going to restore that sculpture which was put down in the UK, the sculpture of Haile Selassie. It is going to be restored. That's what they're saying. Burkina Faso ruling party endorses president for re-election. Definitely, we know Burkina Faso very soon is going to be going to elections. So they have endorsed their current president to stand for re-election. So Tanzania president endorsed for re-election, rejects third term idea again. So this other story here is one that is also very interesting. Tanzanian president is rejecting the idea of a third term. So Chama cha Mapinduzi, which is the ruling party in Tanzania, has endorsed the candidature of President John Pombe Magufuli for the upcoming presidential polls. The president doubles as the CCM national chairman. His endorsement was at National Congress in the capital Dodoma today, of course, which was on Saturday. He also affirmed the choice of Samia Suluhu as his running mate. Magufuli yet again rejected talk of him running for a third term. The idea was raised by the retired president, Ali Hassan Mwinyi. Magufuli, in rejecting the proposition, said the former leader was cracking some usual jokes. Okay, so many who heaped praises on Magufuli say that he had more to install for Tanzania, and he needed another term to run in office. Okay, so in December 2009, President Magufuli rejected the rumor that he wanted to run for a third term, and still the same happened on Saturday when the conversation came back as people were asking him to run. He still rejected that he is not ready or he has not yet made up his mind on running for a third term. This is a usual scenario in Africa where leaders have actually always come out to reject or to deny the facts that they want to run for extra terms in office, or sometimes they actually don't want to make that announcement, maybe thinking it would result into some economic impacts as people will start reacting to what they anticipate to happen throughout that period. So this is the same thing happening to Magufuli. He has actually come out to deny that he has not made any clarifications or any announcement that he's going to be running for president for the third term. Okay, of course, some of the other top stories is Uganda's coronavirus cases surpass 1,000 mark. Of course, there are no deaths till date, but there are more cases that have actually been coming up. Sudan eases lockdown restrictions. Locals lament economic crunch. China also a COVID victim. Embassy jabs busybody Nigerian lawyers. Sierra Leone coronavirus places of worship, main airport to reopen. So in Sierra Leone, places of worship and the airport is going to be opening very, very, very soon. So in Nigeria, the coronavirus cases have surpassed 31,000, and it looks like they are actually increasing. They are actually increasing. So in Nigeria, there COVID-19 cases seem to be increasing, and something needs to be done. Of course, Africa COVID-19 statistics: 578,000 cases confirmed and 12,989 deaths. Of course, those are cases of death that have been registered. Then 284,972 cases of people that have recovered from this deadly virus. Now, Sudan ratifies law banning female genital mutilation. FMG has been a very, very common practice within some groups in southern Sudan, and that has actually resulted into Sudan now setting up a law that ends this practice that degrades women in society, that lowers their dignity in our communities. So bravo Sudan for coming up with that law. I think that law will have a lot to change in the community, and also will have a lot to reduce on the FMG cases that have gone bad and caused a lot of challenges for women in this community. So let's just look slightly deeper. So Sudan ratifies law banning female genital mutilation. Of course, we know this is a practice by so many traditions, so many tribes across Africa. So Sudan's ruling body ratified a law banning the widespread practice of female genital mutilation. The Justice Ministry announced on Friday, handing over the movement for women's rights in Africa country a long-sought victory. This is something that so many human rights groups, especially women advocating for women's rights, have been really, really working so tirelessly to have this law passed. So on Friday, it was a sign of victory for them. So the Sovereign Council passed a set of sweeping amendments to the country's criminal code late Thursday, including one that criminalized the deep-rooted practice. The draft law had been approved by the transitional government that came in power last year following the ouster of Omar el-Bashir. Okay, so these are some of the reforms that I think are actually getting Sudan ready. You know, some of these things that have for long been asked for by the human rights groups and civil advocacies, you know, they are now, the government is now coming out to make sure they fulfill these things. And one of those was the setting up of, you know, a law that bans FMG. And I think this is a very big success for Africa. This is a very, very big success for the women in Sudan who have been, you know, facing the wrath of that very, very backward practice that many tribes in Africa still practice even after people came out to show the disadvantages of such a practice. Okay, so so many stories actually making rounds in Africa, but you know, those are some of the interesting ones that have been able to review this morning. So thank you so much, guys, for watching Around Africa with Ugaman. And hey, don't forget to subscribe if you're new to this channel, and also don't forget to turn on the notifications bell so that you never miss out in any of our uploads. So thank you so much for watching. I'll be coming back to you tomorrow with another segment of Around Africa, where we shall be reviewing some top stories, and of course also talking about what's trending and what's not trending. So I'll see you guys again. Thanks for watching. God bless you all.